So, welcome, Kate, to the podcast. I'm so happy that you say yes to this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor, and it's so funny because I've heard about you for like years and years, and then someone told me said you really need to talk to Muslim, and then over time we've started to get to know each other over time, and I'm just so happy that we can just finally collaborate together. So.
Likewise, yeah. Can you please tell me why you say yes to this podcast?
I believe collaboration is always important. And, I've recognized that we've been doing very similar things for a long time, but what we also do is very different. And since we've met each other, we've, slowly started to, get to know each other over the years and so on. And I always find that in Danish culture, teamwork and collaboration is important because what you offer is very different from what I offer, and everyone connects with people differently. And the more important thing is about helping others. And that's why we do what we do, right? We do this because we genuinely want to help internationals in Denmark. And why not just talk to you and just have a conversation? That's why we're here, right?
I'm so happy to have you. So you are American. So
Yes.
how, and this podcast called An Immigrant's Journey. So how was your journey?
Wow.
If you
It
take
has
us back to the past, what brought you here and how was your journey?
Wow, we have to talk about when I was really young in high school. We have to go very far back. A little bit about myself. I come from Michigan, United States. I like to say I'm from Detroit because it sounds more hardcore, but I'm really from a small town 2 hours away from Detroit. So I come from a village, and in this village is a very, very conservative religious mindset, and I always felt very suppressed by my ideas because I wasn't allowed to think outside the box. I only had to think a specific way, do things in a specific way, act a specific way. I was not allowed to be outside of this box. And then I met two exchange students that changed my life forever. It was a Dane and and a German. And when I finally started talking to them about my ideas about the world and how it should be, and secretly was telling these ideas that I thought were so different, I found out that it wasn't that different at all. And they're like, oh yeah, no, we believe and think the same things that you do. And I was like, what? And I felt for the first time too, that I was validated by my ideas. And I felt so confirmed about these beliefs that were instilled in me. I didn't agree with, that someone actually believed in, and that we had the same values. And so that influenced me originally to study abroad. I was between Germany and Denmark for many years, but I decided to study in Germany because it was cheaper at the time with the currency exchange rate. So I lived in Germany for 6.5 years before I came to Denmark. And I studied and I did my bachelor. I finished my bachelor's, even though it was from Central Michigan University in Germany. I was an au pair. I was an English teacher as well for about 4.5 years. And I finished my master's in European studies, and I was working on my PhD, which I didn't finish, but that's another story. And then through
But how
this
was it?
exchange.
How was it being in Germany? How was it being an immigrant in Germany?
Yeah, it was different. It's still a great experience. And I still I would still consider living there to this day. But there's also also I would say any struggles that any immigrant would have. But I kind of start to realize that, okay, as being a white European background descent, I have more privilege than others. And I'll tell you a really quick story. I had surgery on my head, and so I had to have a bandage on my head. And so what I did, not thinking about it, in Flensburg, I decided to wear a scarf around my head. And so people thought I was from Afghanistan or from the Middle East. And I was targeted, people thinking I was Turkish, etc., saying derogatory names, and like didn't believe I was American. And I was really shocked. Of course, I don't have the same experience as immigrants from the Middle East, but from that experience, I felt what I had a taste of what different immigrants' stories were like compared to in Denmark. And also when I was going from Germany to Denmark, visiting my boyfriend in Denmark with this scarf, I was also looked at, but I didn't have the same type of name calling as I was in Germany, actually. So I think it's a great, I still love Germany, but yeah, that's just a really short story from that experience that I had. So yeah.
So how did you find your boyfriend? You say you come to Denmark to visit your boyfriend. Where did you meet him?
Yeah, that's where I was going to continue off from last time as well, because that exchange student who came to my high school in Denmark, he was having a party in Aarhus, and he was having a festival party. And so I decided to go to the party as I was invited, and I was in Flensburg and he was in Aarhus, only a 2-hour or 2.5-hour train ride. And so I was dressed up, and he was a goth and I was a James Bond girl. And, you know, one thing led to another. And now we've been together for 12 years and married for 7 years. And have 2 beautiful children. So yeah, and that's the story of like Denmark. What brought me to Denmark was love.
What a beautiful love story. Yeah, so good, so good. So now you have been in Denmark in 12 years, and you haven't been
9 years. Sorry, 9 years.
9 years.
Yes, 9 years. Yeah.
But you have been together in 12 years. So you were in Germany and he was in Denmark. Exactly. That was okay. So you haven't been a career coach from day one. So how was your journey in Denmark?
Yeah, so I have a humanities background, and I didn't finish my PhD, right? Because I couldn't find the funding. Because in Germany, it's different than in Denmark. Because in Denmark, you get the funding, whereas in Germany, you need to find the funding. So that wasn't working out, and my English, teaching wasn't going well. And so what led me to Denmark was applying for a job in China. Actually.
Okay.
and I got, but seriously, and I got accepted, and I had like this lucrative package deal for mobility, and like the salary, it was really, really great. And I just and I almost was considering, and I told my boyfriend, spoiler alert, now husband, that I was really considering taking on this role. And then he popped the question, why don't you come in and move in with me and be with me here in Denmark? And that was honestly so scary to me. That was scarier than going to China. And that's crazy, right? Because China and Europe are like, or at least Denmark, are 2 completely different cultures. At least United States and Denmark are a little bit more similar in some regards, but China is like another level. But going in this relationship, I was like, oh my God, this is like the next step for me, like moving in, like being with someone like 24/7, living with them. And so what I did was I took a pros and cons list about like the pros and cons of going to China, pros and cons of going to Denmark. And I remember thinking about this for a while. And then it just like a question just kind of like popped in my head. And I realized that it like didn't matter, because I wrote down the question with this pros and cons list. What would make me happy? And then I realized that that list just didn't matter. And that what mattered was that I wanted to be happy. And I figured, well, I like this man, he is the love of my life. I really have a strong, good feeling about this. Let's go for it. So then that I knew that I had to move and to come to Denmark, but I realized that my humanities degree was basically useless in Aarhus unless I was going for a PhD. So what I did was I analyzed the job market, and I looked at my skills and competences based on what the demand was for at the time. And I really looked at the positive list. And so with this positive list, even if you're an EU or non-EU, a citizen, you can still use this list to see what the demand of what the government is saying, like this is the labor that we need now. And so I remember at the time, sales was in high demand. And I said, okay, I have these skills and competences. I have a little bit of experience from my bachelor studies when I was a student as a telemarketer. Let's see where this takes me. And that led me to working for 4.5 years, working in the startup tech world for between 4.5, 5 years. But unfortunately, it was very short-lived for a lot of these positions. And I was like, oh, like, this is when the imposter syndrome set in. Because when you have as many positions as this, and there's the pressure from the Danish government to have a full-time position in order to get fast-track permanent residency, and also to take Danish courses on top of working, you get very overwhelmed, and it eventually did lead to my depression. When I did have, I don't have depression anymore, but I did at some point. And that led me to what I do now, because it came organically. I actually didn't want originally to go in this direction of having my own business and being a career consultant. It just, everyone was asking me in my Danish courses, like, how are you so good at getting a position? Can you teach me? Like, what is your magic sauce? Like, can you help me? And it just like people just kind of kept coming to me because I was teaching them, they would get a job, and then it just kind of just happened. I wasn't asking for it originally. And then, one thing led to another, and then I became official in 2020. And so that's where it went to. So that's my story, is essentially of how, what I did for free before, and what how it led to this, to being a career consultant.
Sounds beautiful. Sounds beautiful. When if you take us back to your job for 5 years in Danish company, what was your experience there with the Danish culture? How was it? Danish work culture? How was it for you?
Yeah, so I think for me, one of the big challenges, and I think one of the reasons why I had such short-term positions, was that I did not expect the type of culture. I really think I should have, honestly, in retrospect, I should have had a little bit more training on this, to be honest, in the beginning. Because it's very different than American culture, in the sense that as Americans, we feel like we need to be validated. We need to feel that we're always doing a good job. We need to be a little bit more handheld sometimes. Whereas in Denmark, you need to be a lot more independent. You have to balance the independence and teamwork. And I'll give an example. I remember going to my boss for one of the positions, like, quite often for help and advice. And at some point he was like, Kate, I would rather you just figure this out. And even if it takes you all day, I'd rather you take it all day than to figure it out, than to come to me every few hours. So I was like, okay, then I just did. And that took me aback.
Can I stop you here? That's so funny what you're saying, because I had this conversation with a Danish employer that he actually says something about one of my previous customer, that she didn't ask. She did it herself, and she didn't ask. So it's so funny to experience how different is the culture, because his critic was why she didn't ask, why she was stuck in a task, and she did it by herself and spent hours and hours on a task, and she didn't ask. That's funny what you are saying.
And I think it's really about balance, right?
Yeah.
And that's what it really is that I don't think that, of course, like, it is about balancing being independent and so on, but they also don't want to feel like it's handheld. So of course, after some time, if you get stuck, of course you need to ask. But I think because it was just so continuous, that it got a little bit much. And my advice would be that before you get started, like, really talk about the expectations, and like really try to find out, like, what the personality match, that, if it's if it's okay, and if so, how much. Like, just have these type of conversations with your future employer, either like during the interview or even when you start onboarding, because then you can manage the expectations, so then you don't get into problems like this. And I think a lot more intercultural communications training is needed for a lot of these companies, so that then they could, you know, help with the retention and with these kind of issues, right? Another thing I was just thinking about, not only the balancing independent and teamwork, is I mentioned the validation, because a lot of because from a lot of American workplaces, you know, they say, good job, like you're doing so well, and so on. And even if it's a little bit superficial or might come off as superficial to a lot of people, because that's the stereotype of American culture, that like in Denmark, they don't give the validation until they feel like you've earned it. And that is really tough for a lot of internationals. And so I think, so my advice is just, you know, just do your job and expect that you might not get that validation. And when you get it, just take it with pride, you know? And I would be curious, like, what do you think about that? Like, do you feel differently about how to feel that, like how to handle a situation like that?
I always tell people it's so important before they go to an interview that they really read about the culture of the company, because it's so different where you, is it a corporate company, is it a startup company, is it a company in Uland, you know, Uland, Copenhagen is so different. Because the culture in Uland is very different. I was at a course yesterday, and she was a real Uland's person, you know, humble. The sound was low, and you know, I can see the speakers, how they speak, if they are from Copenhagen or if they are from Uland, because I could see it on his body language. It was very nice, calm, you know. And he has a competitor here in Copenhagen, and the competitor is like this, you know, all the way down. So I always tell people, make sure when you go to the interview that you really know about the culture, you really know about dress code. You know, dress code. How are they? I had the experience that one of my previous customers, before he joined me, he wear a suit to go for a software company startup. So it was like, he said, when I arrived, I looked at the boss, he had the jeans with the holes on it, and I was standing with this suit, you know, so totally mismatch. And that was the reason he got he got rejection. And the culture also very important, that be curious, you know, be curious, talk with people. I remember I had one Indian person in my podcast, and he said, we are used to eat with using hands. So he say, I started a job in Denmark in one of the biggest corporate, and I use my hand to eat food, and people just looking at me, and nobody say something. And I was thinking, okay, I do something wrong here, because everybody looking at me, you know. So these are the small things matters when you join a new culture, to understand how things work. Because I am from Iran, so there has been so many misunderstandings between me and Danes as well. So yeah.
No, that's a really good point as well. Something that I also mentioned to my clients as well is, like, you know, one thing you can easily do the research on is just go to the company website, or like go on LinkedIn and see, like, look at the LinkedIn picture and find, like, from like the team, and like find out, like, what is it that they're wearing. Of course, you can only normally see it from the waist up, but when you go on the company website, you get a more of an idea about what is the actual dress code.
Exactly. Yeah. So you told me that because your story remind me of one of the coaches I actually follow on Facebook. She's from Afghanistan, and she's very famous in Sweden. And she always use her story from her journey to Sweden, that coming from Afghanistan, she was not allowed to do this, do that, you know, all this experience she had as a woman. And then coming to Sweden, and suddenly she's allowed to everything. So that's cultural shock. And then finally find out what is her worth. it has been quite journey for her to find that she has a worth. She is actually good in what she's doing, and now she's inspiring coach for other people who standing in that situation. And this is what I can hear from you. So my question is, do you go back to US, to where you come from, with your husband and the kids and visiting a family?
Yeah, it was in the beginning, it was really rocky. So when I left to go to Germany, that was a really heated discussion and argument, because actually before even going back to, like, I have to go further back. So about, oh God, it was 2008, I believe, if I do the math correctly. I wanted to go visit my Danish friend who was the exchange high school, and I just wanted to come visit him for a few years. I raised up the money and did everything. And then my dad just got super scared. And it wasn't so much because of the religion per se, but I think it was, a lot of it was the understanding or the propaganda that is ensued not only in the United States, but in especially in smaller communities, that if you're in a place that is not highly educated, or you're not in a highly educated area, you get misconceptions about what Europe or like Denmark is like. Like, you know, my dad was being fed these ideas from his friends about, like, you know, how unsafe Europe is, and like, you know, that like people, Americans would just get shot off the plane because like these Europeans, they envy our freedoms as an American, and because we have more freedom as an American, Europeans would be so jealous that they would just kill us when we just shouldn't get off the plane. Like, that is how crazy it got. Like, seriously, I'm not kidding on this or exaggerating. And so then I had to show my dad, like, look, this is what the government says about travel. I did the research. I was trying everything to show, like, I was trying to say, even reaching out to family members to come with me to, like, because my dad was so scared of my safety. And I was 18 by the time by this. And then it got to the point where he was so scared for my safety that he put me on house arrest. So I couldn't leave the house. He took away my car. I had no car keys. And I was in the countryside, so I couldn't leave. And I had to tell my dad, look, what you're doing is illegal. This is technically kidnapping because I am 18. Like, you cannot do this to me. And I need to, and it was so bad that I had to get like a friend of mine to pick me up from the car. And then I left, and I made that decision because my dad gave me the ultimatum that if I go to Denmark, that there would be consequences, not knowing what these consequences were going to be. And so that resulted in me not talking to my father for 7 years.
Wow.
Like, and when I say not talking, it was like I was trying to talk to him, but he didn't want that communication, or I was trying to confront him about the past and what happened. He wanted nothing to do with me. So I actually left it. Like, I tried everything with it. It just didn't. And he didn't accept me or my life until I actually got married and got engaged to my current husband. And so, and because of his education, like he didn't have this understanding about, like, with culture and so on, and that he kind of started to accept, and he was so hesitant of my husband in the beginning. But because of his wife, thank God, because without her, I would not have the relationship today. Like, she is the mother of, like, my, like, not the mother, but she is the grandmother of my children. Like, she has earned that title. I am so thankful to her, what she has done to help, like, bind my family together again. And then he came to Denmark to my wedding, and that was beautiful. And so we try to go to the States as much as we can, but
how was his reaction when he came to Denmark and attending to your wedding? What was his reaction?
I know beforehand he was really scared. He was really scared of coming, and it took a lot of convincing because of that story, and being just afraid of, like, not knowing what's on the other side. He's never been outside the United States before, because he's told what's outside the United States is danger. Like, that he's like that. It's like that what, as Americans, we're targeted. So of course, if you believe that, it's very scary. But then once he came to Denmark and started to warm up, and, you know, met my husband's family, he just realized how great people they were. and how great Denmark is to some extent. Like, right, he still has his ideas about socialism and communism, and he thinks they're the same thing, but that's another story. So it's like, so he still has these kind of ideas, but you know, the most important thing to me was that he came to the wedding. He saw the life that I was living, and that now that I have done the more respectable thing to do by now being married and having children, then he's now been finally okay with my life decisions, and finally has recognized me as an adult.
So happy for you. What a touchy story. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, thank you so much. So it's it's amazing story, and it says so much about you, that you know so much about your own value, and nothing can stop you when you take a decision. It's like nothing can stop you when you believe in something.
I remember when I took the decision to go to Denmark to visit my friend, I was really terrified, because I knew that, like, because I was cut off financially from my dad, right? Like he was my provider. He was everything. Like he was going to pay for my college and whatnot. And I didn't know what was going to happen to me. And then I went on this trip, and then I came back and I said, oh my God, what have I done? What, like, am I going to be okay? And, you know, everything worked out. And that's what I would tell my 18-year-old self, is that to reaffirm her that, you know, that I did the right thing, and that it was okay, because everything is going to work out. And, you know, I got full ride scholarships to go to, you know, study in the United States. I was able to provide for myself while, you know, doing my master's in Germany. I'm still considered one of the highest educated woman in my, my mother did my bachelor's degree, but no one did a master's. I know in Europe, every it's so common today to have a master's, but it's not like that in the United States. So I'm the first generation that has the highest degree as a woman in my family, within the multi generations. So yeah, and I had to do things to, you know, get to where I am. But, you know, I think in the time I just had to stay true to myself, because it was mainly about when I looked back at my 18, I said, do I stay home to do what my daddy tells me to do, and, you know, and just keep the peace and have this, or do I take the risk and stay true to myself and be happy? And that was really what it came down to, was like, what is the best decision I know that would make me happy? And I know that if I stayed and did what my dad told me to do, I knew I would not be happy. And who knows, maybe I would have stayed and married a pastor, you know, had 7 kids and stuff like this, you know. But I'm really glad that I kept true to myself. And that's what I would tell anyone, is that it's always about listening to your gut feeling.
Yeah. I always tell people that there are 2 people you need to actually make proud. Is you at the age of 8, and it's you at the age of 80. Yeah. So, because at the age of 8, you are insecure about your future, what is waiting for me, what should I do, which path, and so on. And at the age of 80, you go back to life and say, did I live a life that I'm proud of?
Exactly.
So I'm very happy that you took the decision and come to Denmark, and you have helped so many people to find their path in Denmark.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course, of course. So tell me about your experience, because you had a very not nice experience in Germany. But how was your experience in Denmark? Because I know Danish people loves America. That I know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it has been, because I do say, and I'm very open and honest saying that I do have white privilege. And so even as an American, and so I think it can come off as of now, like in this generation, or with the current presidency, that being as American, I'm more accepted. But I think it comes with the many positions that I've had. I think there is you know, kind of like the screen, kind of like the television screen, you know, with the media, how Danes portray, you know, Americans. And I am a very typical stereotypical American in a lot of ways. I'm loud, I'm boisterous, I have a bubbly, out there personality in many ways, and that could be very attractive. But when you start working in a Danish workplace, they get tired of it pretty quickly, and they don't really. It might be very attractive in the very beginning, But then my theory is that going into it, they're like, oh, this is what we signed up for, and they don't really realize it until later on down the road. And I think they, as Danes, they get like a little bit over, like it's a little bit too much as well. And that was just my experience within like Danish workplace, that I didn't realize this until like reflecting about my past and my work experience, that I was like, oh, this could be actually one of the reasons why I've had these experiences. Of course, it's more complicated than that, but because I've had like temporary jobs, like I've lost positions due to company merger. I lost a job because I put in a strategy that didn't work. I mean, you know, the list can go on, but I think a lot of that time, like when you go through this, I just kind of realized that, oh, like it might seem like nice and shiny and everything, but if you look, if once they experience that, it might be like, oh, I'm a little bit blinded by this. You know? Yeah.
Yeah, in Denmark we have something called janteloven. I don't know how what to say in English. What is it in English?
Law of Jente is like the best translation. Yeah, exactly.
And I am from Iran, but I think Iranian people has the same mentality as American. They are very loud, and one of the biggest different culture between Iran and Denmark is that from childhood you learn to compete. From childhood, so you learn to compete, you learn to be best. So from you are a small kid going to the kindergarten, the teacher bring you up and say, she did this today, you know, he did this today, and now we give this prize to her. And you know, this is something you never experience in Denmark, you know. So and I always tell people that in Denmark, for instance, if your child take a dahl with her to the kindergarten and she doesn't want to share it with the rest, she's not allowed to have it with her. So, you know, learning to share, learning to not compete is something that you are actually learn from childhood here in Denmark. But and that's a huge difference. So this was me coming from Iran, and so many times I could just feel that people get tired of me because they thought I brag. I didn't brag. It's like, it's me. I don't brag. I'm just proud. It's a huge difference between being proud and bragging.
I can tell you another work experience story as well, from a quick story I worked at Sleeknote, which doesn't exist anymore, but I was in that company for about a year and a half. And, you know, in that company or that culture, you know, I was told by my boss that Jentelo didn't apply, but it's very much like, you know, I am a very competitive person. I've learned to slack a little bit more on that over the years, you know, being in Denmark. But at the time, very competitive, also being very ambitious. Like, I'm a very, very ambitious woman as well. I still am. And so I would also, like, you know, brag about, like, you know, making revenue. And I was the only salesperson, but I was really like making revenue, like, up for the company and so on. And I remember him pulling me aside and said, you know, it's great, and we recognize that you're doing a good job, but he asked me to tone it down. And I was a little bit taken aback by that, because I was like, okay, even though he said Jentelo didn't apply in this company, deep down it still does. And they don't, and in Danish companies, I feel like it's so ingrained in the culture that they don't always realize that that Jentelo is still there, you know. And like, it's just so ingrained that they don't know that it's there until it's put in your face. And then when it is put in your face, then everyone gets in an uproar about, like, no, Jentelo, and everyone hates Jentelo in Denmark. All Danes, they all say that Jentelo is like, we don't like Jentelo, but it's still very much ingrained in Danish culture, even though if you can't see it, it's still like that in any culture, right? So
yeah, being loud, I have heard that so many times. I always, I don't know if you have read those small books or blogs I have created about my life in Denmark, you know, all these things, all these taboo subjects that people don't talk about it. And get fired was one of them, because people don't talk about it. Say, we were disagree, or it was the organizational change, all these good stuff people are talking about. Yeah. But in my case, it was about me cannot cope with the management. Me was a fighter, that I fight for the rightness, and that was the reason. So, and when I look back, I have a very, very funny story about interview I had. I had an interview with SCAT IT in Copenhagen, and I should be a hiring manager in that department for IT department. So it was three round. So everything was good. They were crazy about me. I was so happy until the last round. It was with the director. So because it was the third round, everything went good. They gave me a case and so on. And then last 5 minutes, the director just came in to just say hello to me. And then that was it, because the manager told me the job is yours. And then this director came in and say, is there anything in your life that you regret? And I'm very, very honest person, very honest, too honest. So I took him back to a job I had before, and it was a manager I didn't have any respect for. So I told him, yes, I have this experience with this manager, with this company. I didn't have any respect for him. So we had a fight, and I got fired. I took him to the court, and I got 1 year salary.
Wow, that's very brave of you, because normally
I didn't got the job.
No.
Because no.
Yeah, no, but that's what I think, and this is, I think, where we could have a discussion too, because normally I say that there's a difference between being honest and too honest. I think
I was too honest. I remember the manager called me just few minutes after and said, what the heck, Mojgan? Why should you say that? So I said, because he said, is there anything you regret? Of course I regret this, because I should talk to him. Fight doesn't work. I should talk to him and tell him I miss this about his management. So why should I fight? And so on. But again, it's like, it was a very funny story. So the outcome was not good. I didn't got the job. I got a rejection. But the good things happened is that I found that, okay, I don't want to go back to corporate. I want to help other people. And I use this experience every single time I have a workshop, that I tell this funny story and say, please don't be too honest. It's like,
yeah, it's funny because, like, with my story, a lot of it has to do, I think, with that I don't want internationals to go through what I went through, like having as many positions. And I think in the end, for me, the reason why I went for this and why I went into sales was not only because of, I did have a passion for it at the time, or at least I thought I did. But there was so much pressure, not only from the regulations by the Danish government, but also being fluent in Danish, getting the Danish in, having full-time job. And that really overcame where it led to my depression. And honestly, my company got me out of my depression, because in the end, I decided that I didn't want the government to control my life anymore. And I said, look, I really just want to be happy, and I want to do what I want to do now. And I didn't realize that this is what I wanted to do now until I did my first motivational talk. And that was when I started, I started to do motivational speaking because I wanted to first conquer my fear. I didn't know I was going to be a motivational speaker ever, but I wanted to do it one time. I said I'd do it one time because I want to conquer my fear. And I said, okay, if I'm going to do this, what am I going to talk about? And I decided I wanted to talk about my story with all the different positions and tips and tricks, what to do and what not to do, etc. And my first talk in Aarhus was over 80 people. And that was back in 2018.
Wow.
My first talk ever. And then I remember people crying and saying, oh my God, Kate, you're just so inspirational. And like, you know, you give us some tips. And if you have gone through this and you've done it more than 5 times in getting a job, I can do it 1 time.
Yeah, exactly.
And I thought, okay, this is what I meant to do. And it really just got me out of the depression and said, I want to do this because I don't want to go anyone to feel that they can't be happy with their work, and that it's like finding like what is the right path for them in life. Like, because I think in the end with a lot of internationals, right, they just apply to anything and everything. And I understand, like, don't get me wrong, I think of course you need to put money on the table, like money on the table and food on the table, and I understand that, and sometimes there is a means to an end. But if you are going to a job every day and you are crying every day because you are miserable and you don't want to be there, then this is not the place where you need to be, and you need to, like, you know, do something else. Because I really think that in the end it's about your well-being, sense of having a belonging, not only in your job but also in Denmark, and feeling whole. And I think that, you know, if you have this in place, then it makes sense to like job search, because what I do is more the practical side of job searching. And that's also why I love collaborating, is because everyone has different strengths and weaknesses, and some people need a coach. Like, some people need to go have that transition and so on. I can help with the practical things, but I don't do the coaching because that's not my strength. Like, to be honest, sometimes it ends up being coaching a lot of the times with internationals, even if it's not meant to, but that's not my brand and who I am. And for me, it's more important that just people are just happy in doing what they do, and that they don't go through what I have gone through, you know. So
yeah, because you have walked away, and now you show how you succeed, and that's so authentical, you know. That's the way, because you have done the job and you have succeeded. Yeah, there has been some bumps on the way, but you know how to actually manage to come in the other side with more success. So it's a wonderful story you have. So is there any funny stories with you and Danes that you want to share? Some misunderstanding, or yeah, something that you want to share, that you misunderstood the culture, how things works?
Ooh, you put me on a really bad, you're putting me in the spot here, trying to think of a funny story. I can't, I don't know if I have a funny story on the top of my head. I think one of them is more, I think it's more of a quirk. I wouldn't call it a funny story. I would just call it a quirk that was hard for me to get used to. I guess you can call it funny. Like having seats in the theater. That took me a while in Germany as well, because you have these assigned seats that when you have a ticket, you just go into a seat. And I remember just going in, and I bought the ticket, and I didn't look at the seating when I was in Germany. It's the same in Denmark, that I would, like, you know, just sit anywhere. And I remember it was like fully packed for this one showing, and then I was told to, like, this is my seat, and then I was taught how to do this, and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry to take your seat, but now I've made it warm for you. You know, made your seat nice and warm and toasty, you know. And so that took me a little while, like, you know, but in the end, I also was like, actually, this is quite practical. I actually like having a seat, you know, to know that I don't have to stand, because in the United States, you don't have this type of seating, at least in the small town that I'm from. So I remember when I was a teenager and the Lord of the Rings came out, right, with Peter Jackson, like, I remember, like, there were people standing. And that was, like, very normal, like, to do that, like, standing for a movie if it's very popular for a showing. It didn't matter, but I really liked the control of it, at least in Denmark and Germany. So yeah, I guess that's my funny story.
That's nice. That's nice. I didn't know actually that. Yeah, because in Iran we have number for the seats, so that I was used to. But you know, I had another American here in my studio, and the funny story that she says is that, I don't know if it's the same in your city, but she says, where I come from, they invite you for dinner. So you go and sit behind the table and eat your dinner. And when you have done that, then you move to living room and you get your tea, chocolate, cake, whatever. Okay. And she says, we were sitting around this table for more than 1 hour. We were finished by eating, everything finished. And I was thinking maybe I'm not welcome to go to their living room and sit there and eating chocolate with them. So I actually stand up and say, thank you so much for today and goodbye. So and then she said, after that, they contact me, say, what the heck? Why did he do that? Then I found out, okay, it was misunderstanding from my side, because here in Denmark, it's so, it's so normal that people sitting behind the table 3, 4, 5 hours and never go for the living room. So that was her funny story.
Yeah, no, that's actually pretty accurate. I think it also depends on like the family, because I think for some families, they do sit at the table for a long period of time. Some do go to the living room. I think it's also just dependent on like the family culture, because we also have to remember that United States is like a melting pot, and we have so many different cultures from all over the world, and we carry like a lot of these traditions from like generations, even if it's like Americanized, right? Like, you know, in my family, like my mother's side is Polish and my dad's side is German. So I like to make the joke that I'm Prussian, actually, because that's where the generations come from, right? But we've taken a lot of those like traditions from that family. And it's funny because like my friends from high school, I can have one friend in particular, has Italian background, so they have very different type of like traditions and culture in Italy, like from Italy, that they have taken over from like Christmas and that family's tradition as well. So you know, we do so many things that are different, and yes, there are families that do that, but there's also like family culture as well, like within the United States dynamics. So yeah.
I remember my first Danish boyfriend. He was a very nice guy, and I had a very nice family. So my family from Iran, my parents visited me and they invited us for lunch. And my boyfriend's mother, she did a wonderful job at making so many nice things, Danish things. And they really wanted to impress my family. So we come to this lunch, and my father was very talkative. My mother was very quiet person. And I should actually translate what was happening between what my father says to my boyfriend's father and vice versa. So I was the translator. They sitting there and they had so many questions, tons of questions. And my mother and my boyfriend's mother, they were very quiet, both of them. So I'm very reserved. And then I think after 2 hours, my mom got tired and said, how long are we going to sit here? It's so boring. Say, Mom, that is how it is. Please, Mom. And then I think after 2 hours, so it was moving from dining to a living room. And then my boyfriend's father say, oh, Mojgan, come, we go for a walk, me, you, and your dad, and you translate for us. I said, please, take me. I don't want to come with you. I'm tired of this translating. So you go ahead, you two. So they left the home, both of them. My father doesn't speak English at all. And they were out for 1.5 hours. And we were thinking, what's happening? You know, how can they communicate? And then when they came home with so much laughter, and they were laughing and said, wow, how did they manage this? And then we found out that, for instance, my ex-boyfriend's father saying this, and he's talking about right, my father talking about left, and they communicate. So it's like they didn't understand at all what they say, but somehow they managed to take a walk for 1.5 hours. So for me, it was a beautiful experience that it's not about the language. It's about the chemistry between people, you know. It's like these two gentlemen, they decided that we want to get to know each other. So we do what the heck to do that. By my mother and his mother, they were so reserved. They didn't ask anything about each other. It's like, we don't care like that.
Yeah, no, that's a really powerful story too. I've had something similar when I was in Germany as well, because in Germany you're a little bit forced to speak more German than you are in Denmark, you know, with English, right? And I had something, it's a similar story actually with the translation, but in the end, like, you know, even with my limited knowledge of German, we were able to somehow communicate and laugh. And I think a lot of it is like not only the chemistry, but chemistry also, I think it's also body language as well, and how and about how you present yourself and how do you go about communicating with each other. And I think in the end, like, you know, you make it work. And I think that it's like that, even let's say with like job seeking, right? Like chemistry is everything, even when that's what, and that's why I say as well is that if you have a bad feeling and the chemistry is not there, run from that job like as fast as you can. And that's going into this chemistry. I know we're like going a little bit off a little, but I remember as well having this interview, and even though there's like the language, we speak the same like language with English, but I felt something was off. But I felt so desperate because I was trying to get permanent residency and asking questions. And at some point, this company was trying to convince me to take the role. And I was thinking to myself, shouldn't it be the other way around? Like, shouldn't it be where I should be convincing them more? And why do they feel desperate? And I kind of felt this, and eventually I did take the role, but I was only there for a week, and I had to quit because the hiring manager that left, like that hired me, he was going on vacation, so it was his subordinate that was training me. And then after the first day, she like said that she had better things to do. It was like the worst impression of being the first day ever. I was there 15 minutes early to start. And then I remember her coming in and she's like, "Why are you so early?" I was like, well, you know, I'm excited to be here and so on. And she kept telling me every day that she had better things to do than train me. And I had to sit in the office and share an office with this woman.
Seriously?
And she made me cry every day. And then I remember at the end of the week, my husband was like, you have to, like my boyfriend and stuff, he's like, you have to quit. He's like, I cannot stand and bear you cry every day. And he's like, if this is how it's going to be, he's like, you know, I said, don't worry about the job. I will help you. You'll make it. Like, it's going to be fine. And that terrified me because like I had to, for the first time, rely on my boyfriend to help me financially, because I was always financially independent from the time I was 18 till I met him when I think we were like 23, 24, something like that, 23. And that scared me and terrified me because I was like, okay, if I'm financially independent, is he going to control me? Like, you know, like my father did, you know, what's going on? But I ended up trusting him, and I did quit that job. And then I had first time relied and had to trust on someone for that. And that was not the best thing I ever did. But in the end, the story is that you have to really listen for the chemistry.
Exactly. So what happened to the boss when he came back from the vacation and you were not there anymore?
He never contacted me, actually.
He never contacted you?
Never.
Wow. What an awful place to be.
Yeah, I won't say what company it is, but yeah, but it was not a good company. I think they've changed a lot of things since then, to be honest. But it was the CEO. I was the subordinate and the CEO, and then he was the manager. So yeah, I will never say who it is, and it's not on my LinkedIn profile. So yeah. But
so have you had any misunderstanding? Was there any misunderstanding between you and Danes? The way you work, or the cultural misunderstanding, something like that?
That's a really tough question, because I would have to really think about if there was any misunderstandings. I think one time there was a misunderstanding. I mean, I'm sure that there have been. I just can't think of it on the top of my head right now. But to think about I think I would have need a little bit more time to think about that, because I'm sure there was. I just have to delve a little bit into
But the
my
reason
memory bank.
I'm asking you, because you work with the international, and I work with the international as well. But and this is what I always tell people, that don't try to assume, but ask.
Yes.
Because if you think they are saying this, if you just think, ask. Instead of just saying, I think he means that, or she means that. So ask, because then there won't be any misunderstanding, because misunderstanding occurs if there is a bad communication, or is like, because if you have a good communication, you are a good listener, and you respond to what you listen, or you confirm, is it what you are trying to say? It's like that. So
that's very, very good advice.
Yeah.
That's very, very good advice. And I can say with I guess the biggest, for me, like, misunderstanding, I think, in one area was that when I will see if this counts or not, but I remember one particular instance where I was trying to show or tell the company that there was a huge problem in the system, and like nothing was being done. And I was like, look, like, you're using, like, and this is also a cultural difference, because the plan that was set up at the time, because I was working with these SaaS companies, was the plans were built on trust about how much traffic there would be in this specific plan. And there was a lot of and they were trying to go for international, they were trying to go internationally, and they started in Denmark, which, okay, the plans work for the Danish cultural context, but it wasn't working internationally. And I said, look, if you're going to expand, like, in these globally, you can't, like, go just based on trust. Like, you need to make plans that are, like, more controlled, and you need to have, after some time, then you need to have it in the system to change it. And they weren't really understanding that they were losing lots of money. So there was something going on there. I don't know how, like, and I realized that what I needed to do was to actually give facts. And I didn't realize that it just wasn't enough. And I think that was the biggest miscommunication, because I thought that if I just told them, they would just believe me. And there's, because in Danish culture, there's trust. And yes, there's trust, sure, but they need to be backed up by facts. And so what I had to do was make a presentation, and really, even with the topic was something else, I had something on the agenda, and I said, look, I did the calculations. You're losing between this amount of, I think it was like from 5,000 krona as a million to maximum of over like 1 billion krona, which, wow. And I did the math with these different scenarios and said, this is why. But then I remember they also said, well, what do you recommend that we do? And I remember having a harder time with saying what needed to be done. But I said, well, I don't know how this would work technically, but I think we need to have systems in place and implement, and like marketing and so on, that, or have something saying, well, if it goes up with traffic, it'll give a warning, and then otherwise they cancel. And they were afraid to do that because they were like, look, then we're going to lose money. I'm like, not necessarily. Because your system is based on trust. And so I think that was just the biggest miscommunication, was thinking that, yes, there's trust, but you always need to be backed up by facts in these kind of situations. I hope that counts.
Yeah, it does. So now we are living in a country, they need lots of people. And the amount of money that Danish actually newcomer has brought to this society was like huge billion, like it was a billion kron they have actually add values to this society. Yeah. So and they're asking for newcomer, please come join Denmark. We need these people, these people, these people. So what would be your advice to two kind of people? Danish, who take all these new immigrants to their company. So all the company, what will be your advice to them, that how should they take a good care of their new employee with another culture? And what will be your advice to the newcomer who choose to invest their future in Denmark?
Yeah, I think for the advice for Danish companies, I think what I would say is to really invest in intercultural communications and invest in those type of courses, because communication is everything, whether that's body language, verbal language. When you hire an international, you really need to understand these nuances, because a lot of companies, when they are open to hire internationals, but for the first time, and they don't have these community cultural training, then like they end up leaving after so long, because there's a lot of misunderstandings, things happen along the way. And it's also the same for the internationals. Learn how to, like, you know, communicate in the Danish cultural context at work. Like that's also really important to have that training as well. Like learn how to know like what it is to work, and do it beforehand as well. So it comes from both sides. And also, is bear in mind, it's not, and that's something that I regret doing, because I was like, okay, I'm going for a job and I'm doing this now, and I got a job within 2 weeks of coming to Denmark. But in some ways, I really, really wish that I really learned what it was like to work in Denmark and get tips and tricks, because I didn't do that at all. And it's something I really wish I would have had, because a lot of my reflections I had to really think about and like take back after some time, you know, being away from working, to realize, oh, this is actually what happened, really understanding the work culture and understand like what's happened to me, because I had to take myself out to understand what was really going on. So I really invest anyone and say, just take some courses, even if they're free, like just take it, get some insights, get some knowledge on what is it like to work there, right? And it's the same with Danish companies. Learn how to learn intercultural communications, get a professional and train that. I mean, it's not the only thing, obviously, but I would say that's one of the top investments that they should be making.
Exactly. There was a time one Danish company in Falster, they need a mechanical engineer, and this manager called me and said, do you have any mechanical engineer in your portfolio? And I say, yes, I have 6 of them. And he said, bring all of them. So I bring all these people to Falster. It was first time and last time I got the chance to actually participate in the interview. So I could actually see how my candidates perform. And the funny part was with one of my candidates, he's such a nice guy, and now he has a wonderful job. But when he was sitting in front of this hiring manager, and this hiring manager and say, what is it you can do for us? Then he said, I can do this, I can do this. So he talked about 6 different person he could be for them. And the manager was sitting like, seriously, wow, you are Superman, you know? And then I say, shit, I should actually talk about the culture as well to this person. So because the culture he comes from, it was Iran. He comes from the culture that when you, for instance, become a sales person in a company, you need to be a product owner as well. You need to be marketing person as well. You need to be engineer as well. It's like you get so many different hats. This is what they require from you in Iran. But here in Denmark, you need to be a specialist, you know. So specialist, that's the case. So I was so fortunate that I experienced that and said, oh, that is the missing part from my program. I have to teach them. Then I told this manager, it's not because he's bragging that, oh, I am a Superman, but this is what they require from him in Iran. And he was happy to hear that. They say, okay, thank you very much for telling me, because I was thinking, does he lie? What's happening to him?
Yeah, no. And it's funny because because in Danish culture, when you say that I can do all these things, it can come off as desperate. And when it's really not, it's just the culture, right? But it also can be depending on the context. But I'll also tell you a story that was kind of similar. I remember going into an interview like years ago, and I, everything was going well and so on. But he just called me and said, I'm sorry, we decided to go on a candidate with more experience. It's not you. It's just that we decided with someone with more experience. And I said, oh, that's fine. And actually, I see that you were looking for like a marketing person. I have blah, 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 these skills. I remember this big pause on the phone. And he's like, well, Kate, he's like, didn't you tell me that, you know, in 5 years from now, you wanted to be the sales director in a company one day? I was like, oh, you know, yeah, but, you know, I'm a multitasking ninja and I can do all these things, blah, blah, blah. 3 years later, I'm not kidding, 2 to 3 years later, you know, after working at Sleeknote and deciding that, you know, it was a mutual decision that it was time to leave, the CEO, lovely man, who's now, that company is like, he works at another company now. He helped me with his network, and I had a ton of interviews because he recommended me to a lot of people. And that the CEO of that same company, I talked to him, had a great conversation, and said, okay, I'm really interested in having an interview with you. I'm going to talk to my sales director and get back to you. 5 minutes later, I am not kidding, he called me back and said, I am so sorry. I have to cancel the interview with you. He remembers you from 2 years ago. And he said that, unfortunately, you're not the right fit for our company. And I was really shocked. I was so shocked. And I was like, okay, I said, that's fine. But may I ask, why does he think that I'm not the right fit for the company? And he told me, it's because he feels that you don't know what you want to do with your life. And that shows that as well, that it's not only about, like, you know, if you sell yourself and can do all these roles and stuff, it's really much about, they want to be certain that you love what you do and that you're not, like, you know, saying that you're this it's again, this idea of being a specialist. They want, in Danish called, very much about the specialist, but also they want, like, to be certain that this is what you want to do and that you're true to yourself and being honest with yourself. Because if they feel that you're not being honest with them, and which is also a value of Danish culture, that then they think that, okay, well, then is this person going to leave after like X amount of years because they actually want to do something else? Right?
Wow, what a story. Yeah, what a story. And he didn't told you, but he told about you behind your back.
Wow. And he remembered me from 2 years later. And that also comes to show that you need to be very careful with your interviews and still try to, if you have a good connection with them, don't come off as desperate. Like, still maintain that good relationship with them, because Denmark is a small country. People will remember you, right? And of course, like, it's always about connection and about, like, you know, chemistry, and of course about that, but it's also important to build allies and relationships. It's really a balance, right? And if you break off those connections, it goes out the window with opportunities. So also, it's okay to be humble and accept that you might not be the right fit right now, but maybe down the road, that if you have that good, even if you have that good chemistry, you can be invited on later on. So don't always think about the short term, also think about the long term of your career in Denmark.
Yeah, I remember when I say yes to this job in Greenland to go and merge to IT company. I have always had a coach since I turned 40. I've always had a coach, different coach in different area. And I remember when I told my coach that I'm going for this job, moving to Greenland, and he say, maybe it's good that you somehow let go of that rebel of you. So he told me, because he knew me. I didn't took it personally what he said, but I always thought about it, that, okay, before I left for this job, I have been a rebel in different companies I was working in, that I was a revolutionary person and want to make changes, huge changes. And I didn't want to follow. I don't want to be a follower. I was a leader. So somehow, but he called me for a rebel. He said, maybe you go to Greenland and you think about that rebel, that sometimes it doesn't work in Denmark to be that rebel. So that was eye-opening for me, what he said. And that was actually start on a new journey for me, because I was already sick with the stress in Denmark when I moved to Greenland, but I thought it was like nothing. So when I come to Greenland and suddenly you are not busy to do the job like you are busy in Denmark, things are so different in Greenland. then my body started to react and so on. But I'm always thankful for what he told me, because I'm still a rebel. I'm what I am now. But the difference between Mojgan now until then is like, I don't have to fight. I don't have to like be aggressive to say my words or what is it what I want to reach. It's like I am very calm, but still rebel. I'm not a follower. I want to prefer to be a leader, but in totally different way.
Yeah. I think that also comes with age as well, that I've also experienced that. And you are, older and wiser than me, and I acknowledge that as well, and I've also experienced that I
think you are the same age with my daughter. I think you are.
Yeah, I am 35. Yes. And and I've also like started to be a lot, I used to be so much more aggressive. There is still some, rebel in me as well. I think we're very similar in that way, also a fighter, but I've also learned like it's really like a balance. I think
exactly.
Like it really needs to be a balance about picking your fights. And like I'm a mother of 2 kids, and there was someone in my network who was trying to pick a fight with me about something, and I was like, you know what, like, or disagree. It was about disagreeing with something with my content, and I was like, you know what, I don't have the energy for this anymore. Like I've defended myself. I started, and she just kind of wanted to keep going. And I was like, I don't have to defend myself anymore. Like I have 14,000 followers on my LinkedIn. No, sorry, 13, 14 on my Facebook. I have like, I'm known for what I do, and I have the results. Like I don't need to prove myself to her or anyone. It's about being proud of who I am and the accomplishments and so on. And at some point you have to pick your battles, because in the end, I think also that's what has me as a mother, being a mother has been the best thing ever in my life, because for me, it made me realize what was the most important thing in life.
Exactly.
And that's my children in the end, and everything else comes secondary. And I think like being a mother has also calmed me down.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
I don't know if you had that experience as well.
I was 23 when I become mom, and my daughter, she has just given me the best present ever, little Matteo, and she become mom at the age of 35. Yeah. So she, and we always actually talk about that it's so huge different when you become a mom at age of 23 to 35. It's like I can see the way that she behaves. It's so differently from what I behave, because I didn't know so much about that. It's like the most funniest thing I have done is that I was finishing my 9th grade in Denmark, because I had a high school from Iran, but I had to learn Danish. So that's why I took a 9th grade with grown-up people. And then they had a final exam and final party. And I was I gave birth to my daughter during this 9th grade, and it was in March, and the party was in June. So she was only three months old. So I wanted to go to this party, and I didn't know what to do. So I took her with me to this party. And exactly. I took her to this party, and there was this huge hall, and I put it behind the door. I could see her, but it was behind the door in the school. And I went inside and started partying and dancing, and I told my daughter I could never do that now. If I was in her age, it was crazy what I did. And things are different. So but she's a very good mom. Yeah.
That's amazing. I think like for myself, it's about, when you have kids, it's about, and especially when you have multilingual kids as well, or like multiracial kids, it's very much about like when is right for you. I mean, I've seen if you're ready at 23, like good for you, you know, like it's all about timing. But I look back, like I don't think I would be ready at all in my life to have children at a young age, you know. But there is always, you know, like we always have to do what's right for us in our lives.
Exactly.
And having children in my 30s was, I think, like the best for me as well. I mean, yeah, it was tough to have like it really has been tough to have children and running Career Denmark as well. Like it's been quite the journey having children, but in the end, it's always for me about the kids first, and then what I do and I love second.
Exactly.
But there's also the difference. Like I think a lot of people think like, oh, especially in Denmark, I think there's this like stigma that when you are a mom, when you're on your maternity leave, you need to be on maternity leave. And like, that's it. And I'm like, well, I can't just up and leave Career Denmark. I can't just up and leave like, you know, people who need help. It's just not who I am. And it's about balance. I think in the end, like you don't, as a woman, I don't think you need to like give up your career 100%, right?
No.
Of course you need to be there for their children, but it's also like, you also have to do what makes you happy. And like, it's not about like, you have to, like, it's fine to bring your like world like within, like I bring my children into my world to some extent. Like I of course have my values to not put their picture up on social media due to you know, my you know, for their protection and things like this as well, because my oldest son was actually like my family was threatened for what I do now. Like it was about 3 years ago, where someone was upset or whatever, found out what I was doing or whatever, and wrote me on LinkedIn that, you know, if you don't stop what you're doing now, something might happen to your family. I had to show the contact to the police and said, look, I have this threat, you know, and that really scared me. And I know that like some people use
Sorry to hear that. Wow.
Yeah, me too. So, and we shouldn't be in a world like this, but you know, I think like, you know, it's so important doing what we do because, you know, I think sometimes to some people, like we're a threat because we have different ideas and approaches about, you know, what we do, because we just want to help people, and right. And maybe there's people who don't want internationals to come to Denmark, even there's a huge need. There is still, you know, people who think differently. And but that just shows that, okay, that it's also why it's important to do what we do, because otherwise, you know, if they feel there's a reason why they're threatening people like us, because well, we're different and they don't like change. And that's,
it's about them. It's not about us. It's about them. Yeah,
exactly.
It is.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. Is it something you want to add in the end? It was what a wonderful journey you took me in. It was so beautiful, and this is what I love about this podcast, because now I think you are number 16, something like that, and so many different stories, so many beautiful and different stories. Yeah. So, is there something else you want to add in the end?
Yes. There's two mottos that I have. Is that like that anyone who's watching, who is job searching, that do not let anything or anyone define you, and that you have value and worth. I think that a lot of internationals, when you job search for so long, you think that, oh, what my degree from Belarus or Iran or whatever, maybe it's not right. Like you feel like you're devalued because you come from another country, and because of your education, maybe you feel like devalued because you're not fluent in Danish. You know, there's many different reasons, and you know, and that's why I also say to not let anything or anyone define you, because like if like, and that's what I mean is like, if it's about being fluent in Danish in your field, and if that's important to get a job in that field to be fluent in Danish, then learn Danish. If it means to take a certification in Python or whatever, because you're maybe missing a certain skill, learn that skill. You know, don't let you know, a fault, or what, maybe that's not the right wording to call it a fault, but if there is something missing that you need to get into labor market, fix it. Like just do something. Like if there is something that's putting a boundary on you, that is like, you know, not getting you to what you need to do, fix it. You know, because you shouldn't let and say, because I lack Danish, because I do this, It shouldn't let you define in what you do today. And you need to find out, is it about learning how to communicate your value? Is it learning about maybe, okay, I've had emotional trauma, maybe I need a coach, or I need to see a psychotherapist. Learn what, like what is broken, and then fix it, so that then you don't let that past or that skill or that language define you. And that's what my advice to anyone is to, just don't let anything or anyone define you, and that you have value and worth. And that's the most important thing I want to leave with everyone today.
Beautiful advice. Thank you so much. Is there something else you want to say?
Thank you for having me. And I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And if anyone is interested, go to careerdenmark.dk. I have a blog. I have my Facebook page, LinkedIn. You're welcome to follow me on any of those pages for free content. And if there's also a free ebook, anyone is welcome to download my free ebook as well. So
wonderful. And I will put this because I need the text from you. And when I have this text, I will put it on a website called animmigrantjourney.com. And there is a YouTube channel as well, because I have one for Danish podcast and one for English podcast. So it will be there, and I will share it with LinkedIn, and I will tag you, of course.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kate. It was my pleasure. Have a great day, and be awesome as you are.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Bye.